Part 11. Being a Bug in a Survival Game. Author, Kuanke. Chapter 103. As soon as Fatty came back, he couldn't wait to brag to Sutinyu about his brilliant performance on stage. It turns out that before performing on stage, Fatty secretly put on a pair of flesh-colored gloves as a game prop while everyone was not paying attention. Its function is to greatly increase the user's arm strength, and in a short period of time, he can have rock climbing skills that are 10 times more proficient and flexible than apes. When performing on stage, the fat man wore gloves and climbed directly up the iron railing. He stayed at the top of the 10-meter-high iron cage. The wild boars on the ground could not even touch him, and there was nothing they could do to him. In this way, the fat man persisted for 5 minutes and the performance was successful. After Sutinyu heard this, he was dumbfounded and couldn't help but give a thumbs up. "Fat man, you are awesome." Fatty's method was certainly not a temporary idea. Sutinyu also said last night that there was a large iron cage outside the beast fighting arena. At that time, Fatty might have already thought of it. The fat man smiled honestly and blushed a little at the praise. "It's nothing to me. Brother Chin is so awesome. He killed a crocodile with fists and kicks and got the little gift he wished for on the second night." Chin Chi, who had some new blood stains on his clothes, heard the words and spoke slowly. "Fat man was lucky this time. He encountered a beast that couldn't climb or fly, so it was so easy to deal with it." Later players also learned from Fat Man, but they faced the right beast can either climb or fly, or it is extremely fast and will be pulled down and bitten to death before it reaches a certain height. The fat man nodded. Yeah, I haven't used the few props I prepared, but it shouldn't be that easy next time." After Fatty finished his performance, almost all of the beasts that came on stage could not climb or move slowly. It was obvious that they were deliberately preventing the next performer from imitating his example. Sutinyu heard what the two said and asked curiously, "Chin Chi, what is the little gift you want?" Chin Chi and Fatty both had empty hands, and it didn't look like they were carrying anything with them. "I want the privilege of being able to move around freely," Chin Chi said calmly. Sutinyu was a little surprised when he heard this. Chin Chi continued to explain that this privilege actually has many restrictions. 1. The privilege of free movement is limited to you. 2nd, free time is from 7 to 11 o'clock during the day. 3rd, the free movement area can only be on the 5th to 10th underground floors. After listening to Chin Chi's words, Sutinyu answered, "When you went to perform, I learned the general layout of the underground coliseum from the NPC slave. The 10th underground floor where we are now is an area dedicated to holding slaves. The 9th floor is for wild beasts. The 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th floors are connected, which is the coliseum we saw during the performance. Going up, the 3rd and 4th floors are the coliseum staff dormitories, the 2nd floor is the warehouse, and the 1st underground floor is the parking lot. The underground coliseum has 5 floors on the ground. The 1st floor is the reception hall, and the upper floors are restaurants and various game rooms. The underground coliseum is located on the western edge of a city called Beast City." Chin Chi suddenly remembered something and gradually frowned. "Where is the 11th floor underground?" "The floor number displayed in the elevator is the 11th floor underground." Sutinyu shook his head. "I asked several slaves, but no one knew about the situation on the 11th floor underground." The fat man scratched his head at the side. "By the way, boss, that Captain Chris who specializes in raising wild beasts, does he live on the 11th floor underground?" Sutinyu blinked his big eyes and spread his hands helplessly. "I don't know, I've also asked." Those slaves all worshipped Captain Chris crazily, but when asked where he was, no one could answer him properly. A bunch of fake fans. Being a Bug in a Survival Game. Author, Kuanke. Chapter 104. In the corner, Sutinyu and 3 people sat together. Chin Chi leaned against the wall and said softly, "Starting from tomorrow, I will go out during the day to find out the route inside the Colosseum and find a safe escape route as soon as possible. As for the key we are looking for, preliminary speculation is that the first possibility is that it is in the hands of the prison foreman who guards the slaves, and the second possibility is that it is in the hands of Captain Chris. Sutinyu sat cross-legged, supporting her chin with both hands, and added, "If you can't find it, see if you can find the leader's office or something like that. The key that can open the collar is a relatively important item. If you don't carry it with you, 80% of it will be lost. It's placed in an important place." "Well, I will pay attention. If I have a chance, I will go to the 11th floor to explore the situation." Chin-Chi nodded lightly. Now all the slaves have gone through a round of performances, and the rules may be changed on the third night. The fat man's scalp was numb. "You are not asking us to change from insisting on 5 minutes to 10 minutes or 20 minutes, right?" "It's possible." Sutinyu blinked her big eyes. This time she didn't mean to scare the fat man. Now there are only 59 slaves left in the prison, and several of them are seriously injured with missing arms and legs. Without good treatment conditions, it is a problem to survive for several days. The 5-minute performance time feels like just an appetizer. The three of them continued the discussion for an hour, and after making sure that there were no additions or omissions, they went to sleep. Copy on the third day. Daytime. When the clock on the wall of the prison pointed to 7 o'clock, Chin-Chi left the prison. 5 minutes before the allotted time, Chin-Chi came back safely. The 4 players who were beaten up yesterday all had their eyes widened with shock on their faces. Why can this player enter and leave the prison freely? Can you still avoid being beaten? When Chin-Chi came back, he didn't waste any time and directly told Sutinyu and Fatty what he had learned from his trip. The 9th floor is indeed an area dedicated to raising wild animals, but it is not like raising pets. Many wild animals have iron nails as thick as half an adult's arm inserted into their bodies, but they all avoid fatal parts. In addition, there is a strange point, that is, there are no traces of residual feed on the 9th floor and in the animal cages. The preliminary judgment is that the Colosseum wants to stimulate the ferocity of the beasts and make the performance more enjoyable. Sutinyu nodded in agreement. Indeed, if I were the audience, a well-fed beast would definitely be more interesting than a hungry beast. Fatty felt his scalp numb just after hearing the word spectacular. He didn't understand why Brother Chin could say it so humorously. What's more, I don't understand that the boss doesn't think anything is wrong at all. He even nodded. Sutinyu and the two continued to discuss, while Fatty was very distressed. Sure enough, is he the only one who is abnormal? Should he also nod, so he is so gregarious? When it was time to eat, the same 2 prison workers from yesterday pushed the trolley to the prison. When the 2 prison workers were about to leave, Sutinyu suddenly came out and called to stop them. 2 adults, how are you? The slaves were shocked that someone dared to talk to the vicious prison workers. The 2 prison workers looked impatient and just wanted to leave as soon as possible, but a little girl blocked their way. Sutinyu had an innocent look on her face, as if she could not see the anger that was about to burst out from the prison worker, and said again, I just want to ask if this is something that the 2 adults dropped. As he said that, Sutinyu clenched his hands into fists. Right hand was raised and spread out, revealing 2 gold rings in the palm of his hand. When the 2 prison workers saw the golden touch clearly, their expressions changed instantly, and a trace of greed flashed in their eyes. 2021.7.1 The 100th anniversary of the party. I have nothing left to save, but I suddenly remembered that today is the 100th anniversary of the party. What a big day. Moreover, in the last few days of the new book period, I unexpectedly entered the top 40, and I will add more as promised. So, I'm still happy to update. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Being a bug in a survival game. Author, Kuanke. Chapter 105. Didn't the two adults drop it? I think only two adults are qualified to own such a precious ring, Sutingyu muttered, and his voice reached the ears of the two prison workers clearly. Suddenly, stiff smiles appeared on the faces of the two prison workers. Prison worker A, yes, we dropped it. Prison worker B, I thought it looked familiar. This is ours. Sutingyu's face was full of joy. Really? Really? Is ours? Suddenly, the atmosphere between the three of them became friendly and harmonious, especially after Sutingyu personally gave the rings to the two prison workers. There was no trace of anger on the faces of the two prison workers, and the corners of their mouths were exaggeratedly cracked. Of Ark. I'm really happy that I can help these two adults. Listening to the kind and harmless sigh of the little girl in front of them, the two prison workers suddenly felt comfortable. When they looked at Sutingyu, they no longer felt disgust, but a little more favorable. Little girl, go and eat quickly. If any untouchable bullies you in prison, tell us brothers that we will be the ones delivering food these days. The little girl nodded obediently. Yeah, okay, two handsome brothers. Sutingyu, who looks harmless and sounds like a big brother, and has a sweet and gentle voice, makes even the most hard-hearted prison worker soften his attitude. In the end, Sutingyu successfully showed up in front of the two prison workers delivering meals, and gained a wave of favorability. The operation was as fierce as a tiger's and shocked everyone present. After the two prison workers left, Sutingyu took the food for 3 people and jumped back to their small territory. Sutingyu raised his little head towards Qin-Chi and said, "Hey, it's done, I'm awesome." Qin-Chi's lips curled up slightly. "Yeah. Awesome, boss." As the younger brother, the fat man sent a rainbow fart in time. Sutingyu finished her pride and praised the fat man who provided the gold ring. Thanks to the fat man's gold ring, I can now have a relationship with the two prison workers. In this round of dungeons, Fatty also brought some jewelry made of gold, but this time Fatty was smarter and brought small items such as rings that were easy to carry and hide. Through 2 gold rings, get close to 1 or 2 prison workers, and then slowly build a relationship, and then ask for information about the prison foreman and Captain Chris. Now at the beginning, Sutingyu was not in a hurry to talk, as being too hasty would be self-defeating. The honest fat man scratched his head and said modestly, "I thought all the gold jewelry I brought this time was useless. The boss is so powerful that he can think of such a use. Basically, don't be six." Qin-Chi quietly watched the two of them boasting about each other. Suddenly, he felt a few eyes of unknown meaning looking over here. Qin-Chi turned his head, looked over several iron bars, and looked at the owner of those eyes. Inside, there was the man with glasses who was looking for trouble on the first night. In an instant, the soft eyes lost their warmth, and their cold eyes scanned the several players in the crowd. "Dark Knight, has he discovered us?" a male player with a sharp monkey face asked next to the man with glasses. He only looked at Qin-Chi for 2 seconds before he couldn't hold it in anymore and looked away in a panic with a hint of guilt. The bespectacled man's game nickname is Yeshak. He adjusted the glasses on the bridge of his nose and said calmly, "What are you afraid of? We didn't do anything. Sutingyu's strength is different from ordinary people. Qin-Chi killed the crocodile with his bare hands." It looked amazing, but Yeshak could tell that the two of them must have poured all their free attribute points into power to achieve such skill. And Yeshak has seen the level list, clearance list, item list and other lists in the rankings, and knows the nicknames of high player games inside. He had no recollection of the game nicknames of these 3 players. Yezhi speculated in his mind that the 3 of them were just a bit powerful and probably not powerful characters. Being a bug in a survival game. Author, Kuanke. Chapter 106. Yet 11 turned to look at a male player on the other side whose nickname was Laoang Next Door. Laoang Next Door, Do you think that girl really picked up the gold ring? When old Wang next door, who had a scar on his face, heard this, he pondered for a moment, and said in a hoarse voice, "It doesn't look like that. Those two prison workers didn't come into the prison at all. How could they have dropped the gold ring inside? Could they have it on themselves? But they are all slaves, so why can they have gold rings?" Or 2, yet 11 couldn't figure out this. Sutingyu, who was bragging, noticed from the corner of his eye that Qin Chi seemed to be looking in a certain direction, so he asked, "What's the matter, Qin Chi?" Qin Chi withdrew his gaze and said calmly, "Some players are suspicious of our ability to produce gold rings." Ah, the fat man was a little confused. "Who is it?" Sutingyu looked in the direction that Qin Chi had just stared at, and saw a familiar-looking man with glasses, and mouthed, "That guy. The nickname of the game seems to be Yes, and he guessed that Jin. Where did the ring come from?" On the first night, when Yezi deliberately approached and threatened Sutingyu with his game nickname, in turn, Sutingyu was naturally able to find out Yezi's game nickname. After recalling the impressive famous high-level players in his mind, Qin Chi shook his head. "They are probably just ordinary players with a few thoughts. It's okay. When a player enters a dungeon, except for the clothes he is wearing, other items in reality cannot be brought into the dungeon. This is just the perception of ordinary players. But in high player circles, being able to bring gold into a dungeon is a secret. Fatty is an exception. He can find gold by accident and bring it into the dungeon." The player named Yezi, before he knew the details of Sutingyu and the others, he made bold threats. He was a bit scheming, but not careful enough. He was probably an ordinary player. As an ordinary player, Yeshai has probably only experienced a few rounds of games and is not qualified to be exposed to the high-level playing circle, so naturally he will not know the problem. After listening to Qin Chi's analysis, Sutingyu and Fatty were relieved. "Hey, Fatty, we have a performance tonight. Are your props enough to save your life?" "That's enough, boss." Qin Chi didn't interrupt, and sat quietly beside him, listening to the two of them chatting. Actually, there is another point that Qin Chi didn't say. If Yeshao was a high-level player, he wouldn't even dare to threaten Qin Chi if he didn't know him. Time passed bit by bit, and soon it was 7 o'clock in the evening. The peaceful underground coliseum is like an awakened beast, showing its ferocious fangs. In the Beast City, the nobles and civilians who had been busy all day put down the matters at hand and went to the underground coliseum at night. Both the nobles and the mediocre civilians had torn away the hypocrisy and numbness during the day. The mask became a crazy and happy audience in the underground coliseum. 59 slaves were all taken to the stands. The whip man appeared and announced the rules of the next performance with a stinking face. 59 slaves were freely formed into teams of 2, and 1 was left alone, for a total of 30 groups. Each group performed on the same stage with a beast, and each performance lasted 20 minutes. If one person from each group dies or kills a beast, the performance ends early. When everyone heard the final rule, they all became alert to those around them. Every death of one person can end the performance early. This is a conspiracy, inciting 59 slaves to kill each other. After the whip man explained the performance rules, he suddenly laughed sinisterly. "All the pets who perform on stage have been hungry for several meals." After saying this somewhat gloating words, the whip man saw the changes in many people's faces and walked away with a satisfied look on his face. Being a bug in a survival game. Author, Kuan-Ke. Chapter 107. Team up. How to group. This made things difficult for everyone. People's hearts are unpredictable, and the teammates you form a team with cannot be too strong, otherwise you are likely to be stabbed in the back by the opponent and become a meal for wild beasts. None of them knew each other, and they didn't know each other's details, which made it even more difficult to choose teammates. But after hesitating for a long time, When everyone else formed a team, he had to face a beast alone. "Boss, how are we going to form a team?" Fatty speculated uneasily. "There are 3 of them. No matter how we form a team, one person must leave and find another stranger to form a team." Sutinyu glanced around and suddenly saw an extremely familiar figure. He smiled and said, "Chin-chi, Fatty, you two form a team. I have found a suitable teammate." "Ah," the fat man looked confused. Chin-chi watched Sutinyu trotting over and reached out to pat a male slave on the shoulder. The male slave turned his head and saw the person clearly. His face was horrified for a moment, his legs were weak from fear, and he sat down on the ground. "Hello, big brother, let's form a team." The girl's soft voice came. When the male slave heard this, he shook his head crazily. Chin-chi frowned slightly. The male slave looked familiar. The number was 022. "Uh-huh." Sutinyu said with a smile, "I know, brother, you really want to form a team with me, and I agree, but don't be too excited or happy." 022 looked broken. How could he be so excited and happy? This is such despair. Gritting his teeth, 022 wanted to stand up and resist the evil forces, but when he saw the girl in front of him clenching her fists seemingly unintentionally, her finger bones making a clicking sound, he gave in. 022 forced out a smile, "Okay." Everyone gradually began to form a team, and the last remaining unlucky guy was a strong male slave. Outside the stands, the host enlivened the atmosphere as usual, raising the audience's passion to a peak, and then announced the start of tonight's first performance with a friendly smile. The order of taking the stage is also based on number. Whichever group's number is higher will go up first. In 2 nights, Sutinyu and the others roughly figured out the specific performance process and time of the underground coliseum. The performance time is from 7 p.m. to 12 p.m. The host will warm up the show for 5 to 10 minutes at the beginning. There will also be 5 to 10 minutes for the audience to leave before the end. There will be several short 5-minute intermissions in the middle. If the schedule doesn't change much tonight, the performances of the 29 groups will take 2 nights to complete. This requires that the average duration of each performance should not be less than 15 minutes. If the performance ends at once, 29 groups may perform in one night. But no matter what, Sutinyu teamed up with 022. The latter had the higher number and would definitely get his turn tonight. The first group was 2 NPC slaves, who were brought to the fighting stage to start the first performance tonight. As a result, within 10 minutes, both slaves were bitten to death by a tiger. The audience was cheering wildly. The atmosphere in the whole place suddenly boiled. But the remaining slaves felt uncomfortable. It was not the sadness of the rabbit's death and the fox's sorrow, but the surprise and shock. Didn't it mean that if one person dies, the performance will be over? How come both of them are dead? Did that NPC prison worker lie to us? The players were in a panic, like ants on a hot pot, spinning around anxiously. Chin-chi's eyes never left the beast fighting platform. When he saw the tiger killing 2 slaves one after another with an interval of only about 10 seconds, he gradually frowned and suddenly said, "No, that's wrong." "Huh? What's wrong?" Sutinyu turned around and asked after hearing Chin-chi's murmur. "About PK. Dear friends, the editor has just informed me that a PK is coming. I am excited and panicked. PK is a good thing. If the PK is successful, the free period can be longer. If the PK fails, it will be put on the shelves immediately. This makes me very convenient. I'm still reviewing, and I'm not ready to put it on the shelves yet, so please, dear friends, keep reading, voting, commenting, etc. in the past 3 days. PK depends on comprehensive data. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Being a bug in a survival game. Author, Kuan-Ke. Chapter 108. Qin-Chi stared at the animal trainer who was busy calming the tiger on the beast fighting stage, and two prison workers were carrying away the remaining remains of the body, leaving only blood stains on the ground. The performance can be ended early by killing a person or killing a beast. There is nothing wrong with the rules, but the former needs to be sustained until the trainer arrives in time to calm the beast. The time between the two slaves just killed by the tiger was only a few seconds. The animal trainer who is still outside the iron cage can't do anything, Qin-Chi explained quietly. Is this intentional? The mastermind who arranged this kind of performance probably didn't want anyone to come out alive. The usually honest fat man actually started to speculate on conspiracy theories, and his analysis seemed quite reasonable. No, the dungeon has a set of rules. An out-of-order dungeon will only make players unable to find clues to pass the level. From the current point of view, Parallel Paradise is not blindly erasing players. This is what Sutinyu said. The Dawn Mountain dungeon heard what Qin-Chi said, and now he related to Fatty. Even if you fail to clear the dungeon, the player will not be wiped out immediately, but can be deducted with game currency. Even worse, there is a resurrection armor that enters the punishment dungeon to extend the player's life. Is that so? The fat man scratched his head in confusion. Qin-Chi turned to look at the fat man. When we go on stage, follow closely. The fat man was flattered. Okay, brother Qin. The next performance has already begun on the fighting stage, this time with two players and a snow wolf. The two players did not backstab each other as Sutinyu imagined, but were trying to contain Snow Wolf. The threat of a lone wolf is lower than that of a pack of wolves or tigers. In addition, the two strong male players have a numerical advantage. They do not show any fear in the face of the Snow Wolf. Instead, they gradually scare the Snow Wolf and survive. 20 minutes. Looking at the two players who ended up safely, Sutinyu was thoughtful. In this seemingly absurd dungeon, the players start as slaves, which seems very passive, but there are also various rules hidden in it. 1. Slaves can only die in the fighting ring. In private, runaway slaves will be beaten severely at most. Injured slaves will also be given medicine kits to relieve their injuries. 2. Slaves who insist on completing the performance time can survive until the next night. No matter whether they kill the beast or beat the beast half to death, there will be no punishment. 3. Performers who perform well can get small gifts of their wishes, and any outrageous wish can be given, although there are restrictions. 4. The performance will only be held from 7 p.m. to 12 p.m. After watching 7 or 8 performances, some groups cooperated with each other to try to contain or kill the beasts, some groups cooperated well 1 second, and then stabbed each other in the back the next, each wanting the other to fill the beast's belly first. To buy themselves a meager amount of time, some groups couldn't even hold on for 10 minutes, and the two of them joined hands and entered the belly of the beast. 022. After another performance, the prison worker came and called out the next number, and he happened to call Sutinyu's temporary teammate 022. That is to say, the group of Sutinyu and 022 will perform. Boss, be careful, the fat man whispered. Do not worry. Sutinyu looked relaxed and carefree, but on the other hand, 022, who was pulled by her, was not as enthusiastic and excited as ordinary slaves, but was actually trembling. Sutinyu was a little confused. How did this coward pass the performance on the first night? Oh. Sutinyu remembered. 022 encountered a bear and was so frightened that he lay on the ground and pretended to be dead. Bears always like to eat jumping prey rather than dead prey, so they escaped. Being a bug in a survival game. Author, Kuan-Ke. Chapter 109. When Sutinyu walked onto the fighting stage, she seemed to see the host who was smiling like a spring breeze, and her face stiffened for a moment. When Sutinyu wanted to take a closer look, the host still had the same enthusiastic attitude, interacting with the audience, and there was nothing wrong with it. Sutinyu tilted his head. Well, it must be an illusion. Then, Sutinyu patted 022 on the shoulder and spoke passionately, "Brother, let's work hard together and strive to bring a wonderful performance feast to the audience and friends." 022, who was still shivering, "This man is seriously ill." The iron door on the other side opened, and a prison worker pushed a trolley with an iron cage on it, followed closely by the animal trainer. The iron cage is not big, and the animals inside have thick bodies, thick and rough fur, typical rough skin and thick flesh, broad heads, small eyes, flat noses, no ears visible in appearance, and the average body length is about 1 meter. At first glance, it looks quite cute. But Sutinyu didn't dare to be careless. She recognized this animal. Its original name was Honey Badger, nicknamed Brother Flathead, and it was called the most fearless animal in the world. Brother Flathead has a fierce and aggressive temperament and will attack almost everything. He has the motto of "Don't care about life and death, and do it if you don't accept it." Even with the iron cage and collar, the animal trainer still spent a lot of effort to get the unruly Flathead brother to stand on the animal fighting stage honestly. Brother Pingtu suddenly looked at Sutinyu and 022, his cute little eyes full of provocation and disdain. Sutinyu narrowed his eyes slightly. There were all kinds of cries and cheers from the audience. If she heard correctly, the animal trainer just said something to Brother Flathead. "Those two are here to challenge your opponents, to tear them apart, win, there's a honey dinner tonight." Tear me apart? I'm so scared. Sutinyu finished feeling fearful in her heart, then reached out and patted 022 again, "Brother, please protect your little brother. You know, Brother Flathead is famous for his tendency to attack the enemy's weaknesses, and a man's weakness is just that." 022's face froze, obviously remembering Brother Flathead's unique hobby, and suddenly felt a chill down there. "Gentlemen and ladies, let's enjoy this show together." At this time, the host completed the warm-up. The next second, the flat-headed brother, who had been eyeing them for a long time, was like a wild horse, running towards the two of them at extremely fast speeds. But between two people, who will attack first? Brother Flathead's running route began to deviate, and he actually ran towards 022, who looked more difficult to deal with. Sutinyu, who was already prepared and waiting for Brother Flathead to bully her, a weak girl, was slightly stunned. Then she remembered Brother Flathead's unique personality and suddenly realized. As expected of a flat-headed brother in society, if you are tough, you must first pick the opponent who looks the most powerful and threatening. "Oh my God!" 022 wailed and fled in panic. Sutinyu blinked his big eyes and watched in amusement as Flathead brother effortlessly caught up with 022, who was running away with his back turned. The bright claws were taken out and aimed at 022's butt. A poke. Ah! Hiss. Sutinyu felt his teeth aching as he listened to this ecstasy howl that fell 3,000 feet down, as if chrysanthemums were scattered all over the ground. 022 was directly stabbed to the soul by the flat-headed brother. He fell to the ground and rolled, his legs were clamped inward, and his small body was still twitching. "Ha ha ha ha! Look at him like that! Ouch!" The lovely audience at the scene really liked to base their happiness on the pain of others, and their laughter was called bohemian. Being a bug in a survival game. Author, Kuanke. Chapter 110. As the host, Smita expressed great joy when seeing this scene. "In the blink of an eye, when I looked at the stage, I found that the weird female performer didn't have a trace of fear on her face. Instead, she was interested in watching a show, and she even boldly approached the honey badger." Somehow, Smita suddenly had an ominous premonition. When Brother Pingtu noticed that Sutinyu was approaching him, he quickly turned around. There was ferocity in his small eyes, and he slowly looked at Sotingyu with his cold eyes. Tear her to pieces. Tear her to pieces. Listen, the lovely audience is cheering her on again. Sotingyu was in a wonderful mood, and the eyes he looked at Brother Flathead were full of enthusiasm. Raise your hand. Fingers together. Then he waved to the flat-headed brother, as if teasing a puppy, come here. 10. Brother Flathead's anger is rising. The flat-headed brother who always provoked his enemies first was confused and angry. How dare this little two-legged beast dare to provoke it? Brother Pingtu never holds grudges, and he avenges them on the spot. 10. Brother Pingtu immediately gave up the idea of continuing to hit 022, pointed his finger at Sotingyu, and ran towards the ladder. The bright sharp claw slapped Sotingyu's face. If he was hit, he would probably be severely disfigured. Sotingyu showed disgust on his face and simply avoided the flat-headed brother's claws, then kicked him sideways. The flat-headed brother reacted very quickly, twisted his body, and used the thick and rough fur on his back to hit him hard. After rolling twice on the ground, the flat-headed brother stood up unscathed, but his eyes were even more angry. It was actually repelled by a little person. The flat-headed brother, who was once the most powerful person in the group, did not feel at all that he was less than 1 meter in length. Compared with Sotingyu, who was 1.56 meters tall, the latter had an absolute advantage, and he was the real little one. Brother Pingtu refused to accept it and attacked Sotingyu from various cruel and tricky angles, using all kinds of tricks. But no matter what, Sotingyu's reaction was always faster than that of Brother Flathead. He only needed to take a few steps back or turn sideways to avoid attacks, and he could even kick Brother Flathead from time to time. The guy with the flat head has rough skin and thick flesh, and he can't stand being beaten many times. Gradually, Brother Flathead, who was originally the attacker, consumed too much energy and became a little weak. On the other hand, Sotingyu was not impatient, as if he was teasing his silly boy with a bone in his hand. The bloody Colosseum suddenly became weird and turned into a happy circus. Brother Flathead struggled to stand up again, very annoyed, and glared at Sotingyu, "Do you dare to fight with me openly?" Soting's eyes were full of disdain. "You idiot, do you think anyone is as stubborn as you? When Sotingyu beats a pit bull, he should be as aggressive as possible, because to deal with a vicious dog, only if you are more ferocious than it can it be afraid of you from the bottom of your heart." But now, facing the flat-headed brother who is not afraid of life and death, the more fierce Sotingyu is, the more fierce the flat-headed brother will be. In addition, Brother Pingtu was famous for his strong counter-attack ability. To be on the safe side, Sotingyu kept a safe distance and made up his mind to spend his time slowly. But now, the flat-headed brother, who has almost no patience, doesn't want to waste any more time. It started to circle around Sotingyu, and the speed became faster and faster, even so fast that it was hard to see the figure. The flat-headed brother jumped forward, but in the direction of the iron fence. The claws of his limbs clasped the iron fence, using the iron fence to change the angle in an instant, and jumped again. The target was aimed directly at Sotingyu's back before he could turn around. The audience held their breath at this moment, expecting Brother Flathead to boom. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Being a Bug in a Survival Game. Author, Kuanke. Chapter 111. Sotingyu turned around, with her big cute eyes, and glanced at the flat-headed brother who was hit by the iron medical box she threw and hit the iron railing. The part of the iron fence where Brother Flathead's body was in contact seemed to be distorted in a concave arc. Sotingyu clicked his tongue and shook his head. Poor iron fence, so miserable. The medicine box slowly slid from Brother Flathead's face to the ground, making a crisp sound. It was also this sound that seemed to press the pause button on the audience, as if they were awakening from a dream and came back to their senses in a daze. The host's mouth was wide enough to fit a duck egg in. He reacted and quickly adjusted his appearance. The watch on his wrist was ticking. When he lowered his head, he saw that the 20 minutes had ended. But Sotinyu didn't know. She is happy. Step. 2 steps. Like a little, great, fairy, devil, queen, king, her expression excitedly approached the flat-headed brother who fell from the depression in the iron railing. At this time, Brother Flathead was confused. Got hit by the medicine kit. I got hit by the iron railing and got bent, how can I not be confused? Sotinyu raised his eyebrows slightly when he saw that Brother Flathead could still stand up. He suffered 2 consecutive brain blows and was still conscious. He was truly a tough guy. Brother Flathead, who was secretly praised by the culprit, ignored his sore brain and stared at Sotinyu warily. The fearless flat-headed brother seemed to shrink back a little for a moment. It's, time's up. The show is over. The host saw that Sotinyu was still going to find trouble with Brother Pingtu. His brain, which had not been hit, seemed to start to buzz. He subconsciously shouted out, almost shouting Poyin. Sotinyu was very sorry when she heard this. Why are the performances always so short? Sotinyu stopped less than 5 steps in front of Brother Pingtu, who was on all fours on the ground, making an intimidating gesture, trying to look like brother is very fierce, don't mess with him. Sotinyu, who was very innocent, blinked his big eyes, then picked up the medical box that fell on the ground, and signaled to Brother Pingtu, calm down, I'm just picking up something. The flat-headed brother scratched the ground with his front paws, and his eyes shot out with anger, don't think that I am stupid. I didn't know it was this iron thing that smashed my handsome face. Out of anger, Brother Flathead made no further move. Because the performance was over, the animal trainer hurried over, and the flat-headed brother immediately climbed into the cage with his short paws with an arrogant attitude of I will spare your life first. The speed is quite fast. The animal trainer quickly took Brother Flathead down, so that Sotinyu didn't even have time to say a friendly farewell. Sotinyu blinked his big eyes. Oh! She is stepping down too. So, Sotinyu got out of the big iron cage, turned a corner naturally and skillfully, and went to find the host. Sotinyu began to get emotional, dear Mr. Smita. Stop, stop, stop. Smita was angry and angry. He had been mentally building himself up several times, but when he saw Sotinyu, he felt aggrieved and unable to exert himself. I want a little gift from my wish, give it to you. Hey, thank you Mr. Smita, you are really a handsome, elegant, considerate, and excellent host. Sotinyu opened her eyes and boasted nonsense, and then quickly expressed her wish, I need 3 lunch boxes that can hold water and rice and 3 sets of cutlery. Smita? Lunchbox? Tableware? What kind of weird wish is this? Smita was doubtful, but when he saw Sotinyu's little face, he wanted to get out immediately. He waved his hand irritably, go and get it from the staff. Okay, Mr. Smita. Sotinyu achieved his goal and walked off the stage happily while waving to the audience. Still jumping up and down. Being a bug in a survival game. Author, Kuanke. Chapter 112. Sotinyu and 022 are back. The latter was half dead and was dragged back by the prison workers. This time, Ye 11 and other players looked at Sotinyu with a bit more caution and probing eyes. Previously, Ye I, a small group, performed on the second night. They didn't know how Sotinyu could crush Pitbull, and they didn't take Sotinyu seriously, but now, Ye I realized that he seemed to have underestimated this angel Su. Not only is his strength different from ordinary people, but his physical fitness is better than ordinary people in all aspects. Facing Brother Flathead, he has always had the initiative. After clearing this round of dungeons, Check out Angel Su and Qin Chi. Yes, Ye lowered his voice and said to Lao Wang next door. Ye Lao Wang next door nodded. There's no rush to check people. The most important thing now is to clear the level. Su Tingyu came back safely and distributed the newly acquired iron lunch boxes and tableware to Qin Chi and Fatty with a proud expression. Hey, I want the lunch box and cutlery, so I don't have to use a wooden spoon to eat anymore. Thank you, boss. It's a small thing. After Su Tingyu, there were several more performances, but not Qin Chi and Fatty yet. Near midnight, the host announced that the third night's performance was successfully concluded. The audience left and the slaves were taken back to their cells. A total of 18 performances were performed on the third night. There were 30 NPC slaves and 6 players performing. Among them, 14 NPC slaves died and 1 player died. It is worth mentioning that the player who died probably wanted to use the NPC and chose a thin and weak slave to form a team, but he did not expect that he would be tricked to death in turn. The death of that player also sounded a wake-up call to the surviving players. These seemingly fanatical and insane NPC slaves were not as threatless as they appeared. In the prison, all the slaves were physically and mentally exhausted, especially those who were injured like 022, which was even more difficult. I will keep vigil tonight, you should rest first, Su Tingyu said to the 2 of them. In the past few days, Su Tingyu and the 3 of them took turns keeping vigil, making sure that one person was completely awake. Qin Chi moved his lower lip slightly. I come and watch the night. Su Tingyu knew what Qin Chi wanted to say without having to guess. Before anyone could finish speaking, she glared at him lightly. You are injured and you have to get up early in the morning. You 2 will perform again tomorrow night. Why are you keeping watch? Go to sleep. After being suddenly yelled at, Qin Chi's last few words were stuck in his throat and he couldn't say them out. The fat man looked left and right and did not hesitate to side with Su Tingyu. Yes, brother Qin, you are injured. Just leave the night vigil to me and the boss. Qin Chi glanced at the fat man and then at Su Tingyu. Seeing that the 2 of them were resolute, he lowered his head slightly and said in a low voice, yeah. Su Tingyu moved over and suddenly covered Qin Chi's eyes with her little hands. Feeling the trembling eyelashes in her hands, she whispered softly, close your eyes and go to sleep. As soon as he finished speaking, the eyelashes that were fluttering in his hands fell silent. 2 seconds later, another vague hum came out. Su Tingyu didn't let go immediately. After thinking for a moment, she turned to the fat man and said, Fat man, please go away first. Oh, the fat man glanced back and forth at the 2 people who were so close without realizing it. He tried his best to control the smile on his face and left the place quickly. He just suddenly wanted to chat with brother 022. Su Tingyu received an inexplicable look of encouragement from the fat man and was a little confused. Fatty, is this a twitching eye?